back on the Quorn, grown-up Quorn tool and cutter grinder. So probably no machine in this video, but there's several things I wanted to cover. Design considerations as much as anything else. So, and a couple other things. One about a little book that I'm using for reference, and the other about material supplies. Material supplies. I've said before, especially on airplane stuff, that it's really important to have a really good relationship with your local metal suppliers. And I realize everybody's not going to have suppliers locally to you that you can access like this. But, you know, if you can build a relationship, it is really important. It can save you a tremendous amount of money. So I was ready to order some 2-inch round stock, and I was going to order some 12L14 for things like this cap down here, this adjustment knob that goes here. This is off of the standard size Quorn. The dust boots that go here, and then the cap that fits on this end were the main things I wanted 2-inch material for right now. But I also spec'd out 2-inch material for the spindle housing. So I know full well that nobody locally here, neither of my two metal suppliers that I primarily use, are going to stock 2-inch material in any configuration. So I'd already had stuff listed in my shopping cart for online metals, which is, you know, shipping's relatively inexpensive right now. I mean, they've been running specials on shipping for $10, but nonetheless, one of the suppliers that I use has their normal steel rack, which they don't have a great selection, but usually I can find what I'm looking for. Then they've also got a drop rack where you pay a little bit less for, you either pay second or third line, but then they've got a scrap place out back that they put all their surplus stuff, because this particular place will buy out overstocked surplus stuff, things like that. So depending on when you're there, that you may have some real good luck finding some stuff. Other days they may have nothing. But anyway, I went out and wandered out through there and came up with some 2-inch round stock. And of course, it's a mystery metal. Now that I've cut a piece off of it, I'm assuming it's just a cold roll, probably a 1018 from the way it cuts and stuff, although who knows. But for what I want to use it for here, it'll work fine. And you're kind of taking a chance doing that, because you may end up with some exotic alloy that you're not cutting at all with standard tooling. So anyway, this is the rest of what I ended up out of that bar. And I ended up with a 52.5-inch long piece is what it was. And it's not actually 2 inches. Inch and 15/16 is what it mics out now that I've got it here and measured it. But that'll still work perfect for what I wanted. I had spec'd, like I say, 2-inch for those things and 2-inch for the spindle. Well, the actual dimension over the caps and for these dust covers, when I measure off of this casting, is about 1 7/8 inches. So that's going to clean up. You know, we're going to have to sneak our screws and mounting screws in there, but otherwise that'll work fine. I'd spec'd out this outer diameter on this adjustment to be 2-inch. Well, 1 7/8 inches will work fine. It's just in the wind there, and as long as it's a little bigger than this portion, which I spec'd out at 1 3/4 inches, is what it is. So that'll work. For the spindle, the bearing numbers, I'm going to use the same style magneto bearings as the standard Quorn uses. When I spec these out, I believe the number is a E19, and I've sourced them. I don't have them here yet, but I've found a source for those for a relatively good price. I'm not unhappy with it. I'm paying, you know, you're paying what you're paying, but I'm not unhappy with the cost I found them for. Their outer diameter, specs on them, outer diameter is 40 millimeters. So as long as I've got housing material around to suspend those 40 millimeter bearings, well, I've got plenty of room. Well, that works out to be, what is 40 millimeter comes out to 15748. So if I go to, you know, I'll do probably pretty much the full diameter. I do have to kind of be careful, and I'm not going to bore. This is the casting for the spindle. It'll mount here on this upper casting like that. I'm not going to bore that until I fitted this to the inside and figured out where this adjustment goes in here, because I don't want to interfere with those. Tight fit, but then it's a tight fit on the standard Quorn, and this doesn't sit all the way down in here yet because I haven't cut the radius. So I'm going to cut me another piece of this material and turn it down to build me a mandrel to clamp this portion to. Once I've clamped this, why, I can go ahead and cut my outer radius here and get this set on in where it goes. So anyway, that's the way that goes. So anyway, that inch and 15/16 material will work fine. So that's my little rant on there. Now, as far as this portion here, I've decided they call this to be, on the standard Quorn, they call it a, what do they call it? It's a BA, which is British standard. And I believe when I looked at it, let's see what they call for on this. They call it to be a 3/8 BSF, which I believe converts over to 20 threads per inch. I looked it up, but I don't remember, and it doesn't matter. And then they say to mark the divisions on here with 50 divisions. I'm going to vary from that. I'm going to do that with 40 divisions, and I'm going to thread that, and I'm still going to stay with a 3/8 thread, but I'm going to thread that 3/8 40. So it'll index very much like a standard micrometer would, give me 25 thousandths advance per revolution. So that I think will work out just fine. I do have a 3/8 40 tap and die. So that's kind of the layout for that. One of the things when I was researching threads as to what I really wanted to do with that, why I got to going through my library. And this is just an interesting little reference thing. Most guys are going to a machinist handbook to find your specs and dimensions and everything. And I have a machinist handbook. I don't have a brand new copy because they've gotten kind of spendy and I don't need one. What I do have that I go to more than I do a machinist handbook is an old Oddles machinist and toolmaker's handybook. And I picked this up, and this is kind of interesting anyway. I picked this up several years ago at our local used bookstore, and just added it to my library. I reference it more than I do the machinist handbook because I can find things faster, easier, and it's a little more old school, which I actually do like. Now, the thing about it that's interesting, and there's some notations inside it, but it's stamped all over with the guy's name that had it, which is S.E. Hill. Now, I have no idea who that is. You know, it's my last name, but I have no idea who this guy is. So it's just kind of interesting that it popped up at a bookstore local to me. I got it back in '93. It's marked, there's some writing in it that says U.S. Navy and USS Nicholson DD 442, and there's a little bit of other stuff. But this was from 1941, I believe. And yeah, copyright was 1941. And it's got a lot of old school stuff. So if you're into the older machines, why it's the same basic machining information as current day stuff, but it's a lot easier to access, and you can find a whole lot of other stuff in it. It covers machines, and of course there's a lot on lathes, and you're going to find everything that you want about the, operating a lathe. We buy Sheldon lathe operators manuals. We get the ones for the South Bends and the ones for the Atlas and Craftsman. This is kind of that same vintage or that same era of writing about the machines. It's got how to operate a lathe in it. It's interesting because not only does it have that stuff, but it covers machines a little bit. And it's got a section on shapers, but it's also got a section on planers back here. And it shows it's the earlier planer stuff. It actually shows table drive mechanisms, and it shows gearing on table mechanisms, much like is on my Rockford planer. Most of the information you find on planers now is for the later model. If you're into the Rockfords, they're the hydraulic machines. Mine's an early mechanical machine, rack and pinion, and gearing. So it's a little more relevant. There's not a tremendous amount of information, but it's information that you really have trouble finding every place else. So it goes on, it's got information, cams, drafting, things like that. Their index is kind of interesting in that it shows the standard section, shop measuring tools, measuring section A. Section B is freehand drawing and stuff. But anyway, when you go to the index, and it's got a how to use the index thing. To quickly and easily find information on any subject, the following instructions should be noted, and it goes into that. And it says, get in the habit of using this index. It will quickly reveal a vast mine of valuable information. And it really is true. It's relatively easy to access through it. And there's just a little notation underneath it. This says, an hour with a book would have brought to your mind the secret that took the whole year to find. The facts that you learned at enormous expense were all in this book were all in this book to commence. I just found it kind of interesting. But it's really old school. It's one of the things that's got a section on slaughters, and then milling machine cutters, milling machine operation, gears and gear cutting, automatic screw machines. And this is going to be automatic screw machines that you don't normally see anymore, like the old Brown and Sharps. You know, it's got a lot of information on that kind of stuff, how to operate, how to set up your cams and things. And it's just section on tool making. It's really interesting from the aspect of it's kind of old school stuff. The information is still available today, but you have to hunt for it more than you do. So I tend to go to this machinist book a lot. I'm going to spend the rest of the day, I think, probably cutting work for an arbor for this and starting to build parts. You know, another thing about this collar, doing 40 threads per inch, I could do away with the adjustable collar on here and just do a direct read like you would on a micrometer. I'm going to go ahead and leave the adjustment on there because realistically what you want it for is just to null out your settings. So you can stop at any position once you get your cutter and wheel set up, you can zero it out and you can cut all your flutes the same or whatever the case may be. So anyway, I've kind of rambled, kind of gone on again. Hopefully you find this a little bit interesting. Comment suggestions, leave them in the comment section for me below, guys. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.